That's right, this is Ben with the DIY Homefront, and today I'm playing truck mechanic. I'm in my Ford F-150 truck, and I had the AC blower making a bunch of noise a couple weeks ago. I took it apart, and there was a piece that had fallen down in the squirrel fan. So I ordered some parts, and they're in, and now it's time to fix that noise. It apparently is a common problem among F-150 pickup trucks. Enough that there's already 1 or 2 videos on YouTube. Watch those, watch mine, watch all of them, and then try this project yourself. Well, let's get into it. Here's a quick word from me after I finished. Well, like I said, I saved some money, but on a scale of 1 to 10 for me, that was probably about an 8. That was a pain in the butt. Don't watch a video and just think you're going to jump into it. It can be done and you'll save some money, but it is some work. It is a job. Well, that's it for now. Enjoy the video. So this is a 2013 model, so it's 10 years old, and the fan, even after I got the piece that fell down into it out, still makes a bunch of noise. So I'm just going to replace the fan. I got everything I think I'm going to need to do it. I've got my socket set. I've got some wrenches, a couple screwdrivers, some pry tools, and some gloves, which I normally don't care that much about wearing gloves, but there's always those sharp objects inside the dash that cut you. So, and this should be our fan motor. There we go, one fan motor. And this is the other part we need. There's a motor that attaches here and turns this flapper. And this flapper ends up getting fresh air from outside or recycling the air in the car. And if you're using your AC, you know all about that. You want to take the cool air inside your truck and recycle it so it gets cooler, not take that 100-degree air from outside and try to cool it down. So when that breaks off, it ends up in the fan, and that's what causes that noise. So this ends up way back here in the dash, and you would have to disassemble the whole dash to get this out. So what we have to do is take some screws out, and this comes apart, and we're going to fan it apart and try to get this and put it in there. And we're going to have to take a bunch of stuff off to get to all that. So let's get started. We'll use an 8mm socket and take those 4 screws out so we can separate this plastic piece. So this should come apart. We can get this out. And we're done with that. And this is the piece we have to get up into the dash. We're going to have to remove or pull back a bunch of different pieces of plastic and trim so that we can try to get to the back of the dash to put that flapper in. But the first step's probably going to be to remove that fan, because that's how we're going to insert that flapper up into the dash. There's an electrical connector and 3 screws to come out. And all the screws that we're going to be getting out today are going to be hard to get to. The first screw is towards the front of the fan, and you can actually see that one. You know, if these screws were someplace where you could reach them, it would only take about 30 seconds to get one out. But you're going to end up spending 15, 20, 30 minutes trying to get some of these screws out. I still have one more screw to remove before the fan will come out, but I'm deciding to move on to removing the glove box because I wanted to be in a different position for a few minutes. So there's 3 small screws, and they're 7mm, and once you remove those, the glove box will come out. I'm going to remove the airbag because it's going to allow me to see back into the dash, and I think that's going to be helpful trying to get these screws out. The airbag is attached to a metal plate, and you have to remove 3 screws to get that metal plate out. To make sure the airbag doesn't go off while I'm removing it, I want to make sure I disconnect the battery. And I adjusted it so even if it did accidentally wiggle around, it wouldn't touch the positive terminal of the battery. I'm not sure why, but I was having a hard time trying to get the plastic trim piece off that covers the airbag. And you can see by my position, one of the hardest things is just trying to see what you're doing. It turned out I had only taken 2 of the 3 screws out of the metal bracket that holds the airbag. There's an electrical connector on each side of the airbag, and the airbag's a lot bigger of an assembly than I thought it was going to be. And now it's out of the way, and maybe I'll be able to see a little bit better what I'm doing. So we've got to work our way to the back of the dash. And there's these 4 connectors that are held in place by a metal bracket. And I need to get that metal bracket out of the way because I've got to get my hand and my screwdriver or my socket wrench back and get some screws out. And there's just no way to do it. So here you can see I've got all 4 of those connectors disconnected from that metal bracket. And now I'm going to take out the screws that hold the metal bracket in place. Now the metal bracket is out of the way, and there's still the wiring harness and the connectors there, but at least I can move my hand freely around them to get farther behind there. Okay, this is where it's going to start really getting tricky. That green screw needs to come out. It's holding the motor on that turns that flapper back and forth, and it's going to be right there. And we're also going to need to take off the other 4 screws that hold these 2 halves together to get that flapper out. And none of them are easy to get to. I've got 2 extensions and a universal joint on the end of my ratchet. And I'm using a thin LED light to see what I'm doing. I think if you tried to do this with just a flashlight, it would be extremely difficult. And for every screw that I'm showing you, I might have taken anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes to try to get it out. This is an all-day job. Now it's on to the next screw, and I'm using an impact driver where I can, just to try to speed up the process. Because ratcheting it by hand and trying to hold it in position is difficult. So this is the first of 4 screws that I have to take out if I want to separate that piece in half and put the flap in and out. I've got my camera shoved up into the space where that metal bracket that held all the wiring harnesses were. And here you can see the second screw that needs to come out. It was at this time that I got the last screw out of the fan below and got the fan for the AC unit out of the way. Here the camera is laying on the floor looking straight up towards the sky inside of where the fan was mounted, and you can see the flapper plate that's in there that we've got to get out. I probably spent about 15 minutes trying to get that flapper down and realized that I was going to have to continue taking more screws out before it was going to budge at all. So here I am trying to find another screw and get to it with a wrench to get it off. There's a stud that comes out where this opening is with a nut on top of it. And if I'm going to get this to clamshell apart, I need to get that nut off. And after I get it off, I'm going to let the camera back out some so you can see sort of where it is up in the dash. Once again, this is a location where the motor is that controls the flapper. And we took one screw out, and now we need to loosen this one up. So this is what the piece looks like inside the dash, and we're looking at the motor. And now I'm going to take the screwdriver and point to the screw we need to loosen up. Let me explain what you're looking at. This is going to be that housing that we're trying to split in half. And here's the motor with one screw missing and one screw loosened. And I had to remove 2 more screws. And those screws would have been screwing down towards the bottom of the truck. And then finally, to get the housing to split open, I took a long screwdriver and pried it up from the fan shroud it was in. It took me about 18 minutes to get the flapper installed. And to be honest, it probably took twice as long to get the old one out. The problem is you have to sort of bend it into inside of where it's at, but you don't have any leverage to do that because of where it's located. I had to take a break and get a bite to eat and something to drink after getting this done just so I could straighten back up. I don't think I could have made it through the day without having this fan blow on me, just to keep the bugs off of me and to keep me cool. Well, now that I've got the flapper in place, I can go ahead and start getting these screws back in that hold the housing together and in place. And it probably took just as much time to get the screws in as it did to get them out. Hard to get to, hard to reach, just hard. I used some transparent tape to hold the screws onto the end of the socket so I could actually get the screws in place without them falling off the end of the socket. And this is what it looks like if you're watching me try to get these screws in. I would have never been able to get my left hand into the dash like that if I hadn't removed that metal bracket that held all the wiring harnesses together. Well, I'm to the point where I want to check some of my work, which means I want to turn the AC unit on, which means connecting power back to the truck. So I'm going to reinstall the airbag, the fan motor, and then hook the battery back up so I can turn the AC on to see what it's doing. After I got the 2 connectors for the airbag plugged in and slid into place, it was time to put those 3 screws that held the metal bracket to the dash. Now that the airbag's connected, I put in the AC blower. 1, 2, 3, and a connector right there. Well, this one's been a little tougher than I thought it was going to be. I ended up having to take almost all the screws out so I could really open that in half to get that piece in there. And it was quite a struggle. I think I ended up doing better than some of the videos I watched. 2 people ended up spending about an hour and a half to get the flap out and about 2 hours to get it back in. And I didn't spend anywhere near that amount of time. But I did decide that I was going to go ahead and take a bunch of the screws out so that way I could get it broken too, so to speak. Because the first time I tried to shove it in, I was like, wow, I'm going to end up breaking this just trying to get it back in. I don't know if I would recommend doing this on your own or not. It is a workout. I'll have to look up the parts and see how much it costs. I imagine this job would be quite expensive if you took it to a dealership. From what I'm seeing, it looks like you'd have to take the steering wheel down, disassemble a great portion of the dash, possibly take the AC unit and evacuate it so you could remove that to get to those pieces, because they're really not designed to to be broken in half like we're doing. At any rate, we're going to keep pushing forward. Well, I'm almost down to the moment of truth. I'm going to hook up the battery so that way I can adjust on the controls of the dashboard where that flap is supposed to be, so I can line that motor up and put it back in the right spot. go. AC is on. I don't think the AC's ever been that quiet before. I was having a hard time getting the gear on the motor to line up with the gears that were on the flapper. So I ended up pushing the button that changes it from recycled air to fresh air so that it would cycle through its range of motion, and then push the gear on top of the flapper once it got into the right spot. Once I got the gears all lined up, I tightened up the one screw and put in the other screw, and that meant the motor was clamped down to that housing. The last couple things to do was to hook up the bracket that held all those connectors in place and put the glove box back in. Well, I'm sitting in here enjoying the AC with the fan on high that doesn't make any noise. I'm glad I got it all back together. I have no idea how much money I saved, but if the dealership charges $100 an hour for labor, I saved a bunch. Well, I hope you guys had a fun watching me struggle on that one. Like, subscribe, check out my playlist, and I'll see you in another video. And don't forget to like and subscribe.